Activist groups created and released a critical media literacy toolkit to guide educators when discussing the war between Israel and Hamas, now sparking controversy around the language and content aimed towards teachers and students across the country. Joining us this morning to discuss is Parents Defending Education Director of Outreach, Erika Sanzi. Welcome to the National Desk, Erika. Welcome back, I should say.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Last month, the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies shared a link to its critical media literacy rooted in ethnic studies, a curriculum toolkit for Palestine. What kinds of lesson plans and resources are we seeing here?
Well, a good way to think about this is if for people who have seen these holiday disruptions of people blocking the roads to get into JFK Airport or the airport in Los Angeles or the airport in Chicago, that's largely what this is. So in addition to this toolkit, being about totally anti-American, totally anti-Israel, totally against Western values, and, the usual stuff we hear about the oppressor versus oppressed, et cetera, it calls for action, and the action that it calls for is what we were seeing in the streets with people blocking traffic. It also has petitions for students or staff to send to elected officials. And these are petitions that accuse Israel of genocide. So again, the language, it's very extreme. And if you can imagine sort of the most extreme protests and demonstrations that people have been seeing just across the country, the language is largely the same as what we're seeing in this toolkit.
The toolkit, it says, is created by educators with the goal of fostering critical, humanizing, and liberatory conversations about what is happening in our world today, and states all media is political, all media is subjective, and all media has a purpose and serves who owns and creates the media. Your thoughts on this message and what students could take away from this?
Again, because they use the word critical, it's important to know that what they're talking about there is the word critical as it's used with critical studies, critical race theory, critical gender theory. And again, this is all about power dynamics. And so what they're basically, this isn't really just a comment about media bias, which certainly does exist, and we could debate that. This is essentially saying that if the media is even, commenting on the brutal murder, rape, torture that occurred on October 7th, that then the media is wrong because this group doesn't see anything wrong with what happened on October 7th. So again, it's very hard to wrap our minds around how extreme this is. But this isn't just that, we think that the media is taking Israel's side, or we don't think that they're giving enough attention to the Palestinians. And again, people could debate that. This is essentially that if you are criticizing Hamas for what happened on October 7th, this group's going to have a problem with you.
So far, no school districts, Erika, have outwardly embraced this particular curriculum toolkit, but your organization found there are actually 18 school districts and one state education agency that have links to the organizations or closely affiliated individuals. So to what extent do you think this material could be entering classrooms?
Yeah, this is going to be really hard to measure. I mean, one thing I would say to people that as soon as you hear the words liberated ethnic studies, you have to know that it's an extremely radical, anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Israel mindset, right? So that's just going to be a philosophy and an ideology that's extreme. And so, unfortunately, in a lot of the school districts that have ethnic studies requirements, they have pulled from that liberated ethnic studies version, which is really bad, as opposed to, there are other ways to teach ethnic studies that aren't that. So where this gets tricky is we know that there's a lot of liberated ethnic studies in schools, particularly California, where it's a required course. And it gets hard to know what resources are teachers deciding that they're going to use. Because again, this at this point it's unlikely to see an entire district having adopted, quote unquote, this toolkit. What it is it's just that a teacher may pull a resource. Hey kids, today we're going to write a letter to this elected official, accusing Israel of genocide and calling for a ceasefire. That's going to be very hard to track. My sense is that it's probably is happening. I don't certainly think that it's pervasive at all. But again, hard to measure because people can just sort of pull like an a la carte menu, and we would only know it if students or parents or other staff members were to let us know.
Certainly won't be the end of this conversation, but we do appreciate your time this morning. Parents Defending Education Director of Outreach, Erika Sanzi, thank you for joining us, and have a happy new year.
Thanks so much for having me.